All right, great. Well, thank you, Michaela, so much, and thank you everyone for joining our webinar today. Really excited to have so many of you on the line. This is a really exciting day for us as an organization as we continue to evolve and grow and invest in our solution to make it better, to make it stronger, to make it more valuable to everyone on the line today. We have arrived at the first release of our next generation wave of primary sexual assault prevention courses. And we're going to show you what went into the building of this course, what it looks like, the technology, the functionality, the data, and how our partners have used that to drive impact at their institutions. I'm going to do some quick intros of my colleagues who are on the line with me today. First is Holly Ryder-Milkovich, who's a Senior Director of Prevention Education at EVERFI. She brings over 2 decades experience in sexual harassment prevention and public health education. Those of you who have joined our webinars before will likely recognize Holly, as she is quite the regular here. Also joined by Karen Langman, who is a Content Product Manager for EVERFI's Sexual Assault Prevention courses. Prior to joining EVERFI, Karen developed curriculum for and taught online courses in numerous graduate and undergraduate departments while she was earning her PhD in English rhetoric. And I'm Jennifer Oyoung. I'm a Vice President at EVERFI. I've worked with hundreds of institutions, many of you on the line, over the last several years. I work strategically with colleges and university partners to deploy compliance and prevention programs aligned with your institutional success initiatives. And so just to go into the agenda for today, if we want to go to the next slide so everyone knows what to be expecting, Holly's going to start us off shedding light on the prevention-based pedagogy and the framework that went into building our sexual assault prevention for undergraduates course. Karen is then going to take us through the process of building this course and also share a live demo. And then I'll circle back at the end around data and how institutions have used our data to drive impact at their own institutions, to secure additional funding initiatives, and so on. And so with that, let's get started. We're going to start with a poll. Those who are regulars know that this is an important activity for us. The intention of this poll is to give you all, as well as us, a sense of who's on the line, and this will be important later on in the webinar, so please, if we could have 100% participation from the get-go, that would be very much appreciated. And so the poll question is, are you currently using EVERFI for primary sexual assault prevention education? And the options are yes, via one of the Haven programs, yes, via Think About It, yes, via Campus Answers, or no. Obviously, as our organization has grown over the last 1.5 years, 2 years, there are a number of options here, and it would be really helpful for everyone to understand the makeup of the participants on the webinar today. So we're going to leave this open for just a few seconds longer. We're great. We are at over about 85% completion, so we can go ahead and shut off the poll and look at the results. Okay, great. So looking here, about half of the participants are using one of the Haven courses, some Think About It users, some Campus Answers users, and a meaningful amount of participants who are not using us in any of those forms. So for those of you who are new to EVERFI, welcome, and again, thank you so much for participating. Regardless of how you responded to this poll, the information that we're sharing today is going to be new, I mean, differing levels of new, but if you're new to EVERFI and don't currently work with us, this will be very new, and even so for those who are Campus Clarity and Campus Answers partners, and even those who already work with us at EVERFI. So we're really excited to share more about this new course launch. So let's get started, and with that, I'll pass it off to Holly.
Thank you so much. I am excited to be talking about this new course. I'll tell you, we've had our sleeves rolled up here at EVERFI over the last year, really digging into how can we build on the work that we've already done over the past decade. So how can we extend those 10 years of impact to really continue to make a difference in the lives of students across the country. So let's go ahead and advance to the first slide. I always like to start when we're talking about achieving impact with the CDC's Principles for Effective Prevention. It's such an important check that we're doing our best work possible, and that is the high standard that we aspire to achieve it at EVERFI, and that we hope that you're aspiring to achieve as well. And so looking at all of these principles of prevention, they're all really essential to achieving impact. But I am going to focus here on 3 specific components: the principle of sufficient dosage, the principle of prevention efforts being theory-driven, and that they be evaluated for outcomes, because it is these 3 elements, I think, that are particularly critical when it comes to thinking about developing those population-wide education efforts that we know are going to move the needle on this critical health and safety well-being issue for students. So thinking about sufficient dosage, this is really about the how much that is at the core of all prevention education. The language of dosage obviously is going to connect us to our public health roots. That is the frame of the work that we do here at EVERFI. And it's about ensuring that you're delivering training with a frequency that will ensure that the positive impact that you're seeking to achieve in any of your prevention interventions is going to be sustained. So that sufficient dosage is really also important as it relates to the outcome evaluation. We're going to get to that in a second. After all, you can only measure progress over time with multiple prevention interventions that are evaluated. And probably it should go without saying, but the one and done program that was in the past often the way in which campuses addressed this issue is unlikely to accomplish either the goal of shifting student attitudes, beliefs, behaviors, or a goal of achieving compliance with federal and state mandates around this issue. We're going to talk more about those mandates in just a second. So moving now into that theory-driven component. If sufficient dosage is about how much, the principle that prevention efforts need to be theory-driven is all about the why and the how. So basically, you need to identify the change mechanism that's going to support the work that you're doing. How an intervention, be that an in-person program or workshop, a poster campaign, an art show, a march, an online program, is intended to achieve the outcomes that you've articulated. So in other words, why are you using this intervention for this population to address the goal that you've identified? And it's so important that there be a theory of change, because like the next piece we're going to talk, that's a critical component to creating a logic model so that you can identify how you're going to be creating change over a period of time across all of your student populations. One of the things that we know about prevention efforts on college campuses across the country from our research on the comprehensive prevention approaches of schools and colleges is that around a quarter of campuses have a logic model that is driving their prevention efforts, so that they understand how it is that all of the efforts that they are intending to achieve change are actually going to do that. Having the why and the how, that theory-driven approach, is absolutely essential to being able to get to that next step, which we know is such an important part of creating change. And lastly, we move to outcomes evaluation. What we're driving for here is data on several fold. Whether the program is successfully conveying the learning objectives that you've outlined for this audience, whether there is positive change in students' knowledge about their issues, their attitudes related to, for example, their willingness to intervene in situations of harm. Those pieces give you specific community-based data about your students, about hopefully you're also getting that about your faculty and your staff as well. And that data is going to help you shape additional programming efforts that are specific to the strengths of your community and that hone in on those areas of specific concern. And being able to both harness those strengths and hone in on those areas of concern is also really important, because we know that every institution, no matter how well resourced, continues to need to find ways to be more effective with the prevention dollars that you've been given. And so having that outcomes evaluation is essential for being able to do the best work with the dollars that you've allocated for this work. We could move to the next slide, please. Okay, but of course, as we're talking about prevention and impact, we also always need to be looking at making sure that we're clearing that floor of compliance that federal and state mandates also put in place. And I want to pause here and just note that with all of the possible changes to Title IX that are swirling around the higher education water cooler these days, I think it's important to note that the changes the Department of Education guidance has been proposed, while significant on the response front, does not actually impact the requirements for prevention that are embedded in the Clery Act. So because the Clery Act is law, it's not guidance, and so it's not subject to the same kinds of change by the Department of Education that the Title IX guidance is. Both of those pieces are critically important, but when we're thinking about what might be shifting, I want to assure everyone who's on this webinar that those prevention expectations in the Clery Act have not changed, are not subject to change by the Department of Education alone, and are not even subject to conversation about change. Those are really set in place. All right, so let's take a look then at those Clery Act requirements. One of the things that I really love about the Clery Act, the vow amendments to the Clery Act, which is where our prevention education mandates are located, is that they align so well with what we see in those CDC principles of effective prevention. So we see here, just to note, in the incoming education, we have a responsibility to provide to all students, and that's all of our students who are registered for courses, be they students who are on campus, be they students who are registered for online, who are taking courses remotely through online education and degree programs, be it students who are potentially taking courses in remote locations to our campus, graduate students and professional students as well. All of those students, we have a responsibility and an obligation to provide them with specific programming, offer it to them as they're coming into our campus. But here are a couple of other pieces that also align with that best practice. So you saw that for the CDC, principles of effective prevention, it's important that programs be culturally relevant. Also, the Clery Act requires that those programs be inclusive of diverse communities and identities, so that your programming is really speaking to the wide variety of students that you have on your campus and seeking to meet their specific needs. We see that in the CDC's efforts that it be sustainable. And then we also see in the Clery Act that it be responsive to community needs. Both of those pieces are really about knowing your student, faculty, and staff population and tailoring your programs to meet the needs that you've identified in each of those populations. Informed by research, of course, we've already talked about that, or assessed for value, effectiveness, or outcome. And this is a really important piece because as you're looking to ensure that you are filling the responsibilities related to those vow amendments to the Clery Act, you have to be able to articulate how your work has been informed by research or assessed on your campus for value, effectiveness, or outcome. We know that there continues to not be enough research in sexual assault prevention. This is an area that has really taken off over the last 6 years, but this is an area that continues to need a lot of growth. And so making sure that minimally that they are being assessed, that minimally that you are seeking outcomes for the work that you're doing. And then as our field continues to grow, we're going to continue to see more and more research, and you can really move towards that silver, gold, and platinum standard of informed by research, demonstrated to be efficacious, and then have that platinum designation that it have demonstrated efficacy. And consider environmental risk and protective factors as they occur on the individual, relationship, institutional, community, and the societal level. That piece is really about ensuring that you have a comprehensive approach so that your prevention efforts are not just about delivering individual programming to individual students, but it's taking the entire socio-ecological scope of your campus in mind. And let's go ahead and move forward to the next slide if we could, please. Thank you very much. And of course, those principles of effective prevention and those clear requirements are most effective when they're enacted within a framework that systematically supports and promotes prevention, starting from that foundation of institutionalization, which if you've been on an EVERFI webinar in the past, you've seen this framework for comprehensive prevention. But I'm such a believer. I think it's so important that all of our work have this framework. Again, starting at that foundation of institutionalization, moving through those critical processes and policy to that tip of the spear, where unfortunately some think prevention both begins and ends, but which we know it does not, and that is programming. I'm not going to spend a lot more time here, but I'll just note that you can learn more about this framework and applying the framework to your campus prevention efforts at our Campus Prevention Network website, which is campuspreventionnetwork.com. You can visit the site, take the pledge, and join hundreds of peer institutions in committing to the best practices in prevention. If we could go ahead to the next slide, please. And now this is the place where we demonstrate that here at EVERFI, we really believe in walking the talk when it comes to impact. And so I'm just going to note that when often I'm engaging with partners, one of the questions that we hear is, does online education actually work? And I love getting this question because, first of all, we want for campuses to be interrogating the efficacy of the prevention efforts they're considering adopting, be it ours or anyone else's. And so when folks ask me, does prevention education actually work? Of course, the question is, it depends on what the outcomes you're intending for. And so this slide really hones in on a distillation of the research led by EVERFI's Dr. Dan Zapp and other colleagues in our sexual assault prevention course for undergraduate students, and how that sexual assault prevention course achieves the outcomes that it is intended to achieve. So what you see here is research that represents 80 four-year institutions who completed pre-intervention and post-intervention surveys of the sexual assault prevention course for undergraduate students to assess changes primarily in students' ability to intervene in situations of harm and to increase the likelihood through their intent to intervene in those situations of harm, and to increase empathy for those who have experienced harm and support for survivors. I'm going to note that the 80 institutions that we honed in on to demonstrate this impact were both had adequate implementation of this course and adequate completion of the course to ensure that we had a very strong data set. And as this chart reflects, where we see the most significant change for student populations, so for this universal population approach, and the overwhelming majority of campuses that were investigated are in the areas that are the most critical to moving the needle on culture change, which is students' intent to intervene and their perceived ability to intervene. So 78 out of 80 campuses saw positive changes in that top line most important area. And it's not just small change, although small changes in social science research are themselves significant, and especially across a universal population can add up to really moving the needle. What is exceedingly rare, and what I'm so proud to be able to share with you today, is that we actually see medium and large changes on 60% of our campuses on that key high-level area, which is so important. We also see significant changes, large changes in the empathy and support factor as well for a wide majority of the campuses that we took a look at. I'm going to bring you down to the bottom here because I want to talk a little bit about this sexual assault myth factor change. So you'll see that we actually have very little change in that sexual assault myth factor. And the reason for that is that there was actually on campuses very little support for these myths to begin with. And so there's not much room for improvement from pre to post that was possible over the course of, through the course. And so I actually see this as a positive finding as well. There's another important piece here, which is that it also tells us that as a field, as we're looking across the nation, that it is likely going to be less effective to focus campus prevention efforts on dispelling sexual assault myths as the primary motivation for your prevention approach. It is a lot more effective to embrace a social norms correction approach so that students are much more likely to be willing to intervene in situations of harm and to be building the skills so that they are able to do so. So I'm going to go ahead and move us to the next slide, if I could, please. Really briefly, this is a slide that shares with you what the student sample looked like school by school in the study that I just shared with you. I want to share this with you because we want for you to know that the research on these 80 campuses reflects school demographics that are likely going to be similar to the demographics on your campus. It's very important to us in this research that that the schools that we're looking at, that the sample that we're looking at is representative of the incoming student population into four-year colleges across the nation. And if we can go to the next slide. Thank you. And then in addition to the research that we just shared that's going to be coming out in the Journal of Interpersonal Violence this spring, we've partnered with other violence prevention researchers across the country to continue to dig into the efficacy of our work. And so you can see here on this slide a brief sweep across the scope of our research. So for me, this represents really a commitment to continuing to ask questions about how our courses work, where they are the most effective, and for which student audiences. It both lives into the expectation that we hope that you will have with us and with every other organization you partner with in your prevention efforts to be asking those critical questions. But I also think that it's about fulfilling an ethical responsibility to the young people under our care, that we're doing everything that we can to prevent them from experiencing or re-experiencing violence. And we do that by continuing to ask, how are our programs effective? For whom are they effective? When are they effective? And why? Looping back to what we talked about earlier in this webinar. And if I could move to the next slide, please. All right, I don't want to leave you without some additional resources about how you can do the best work possible. What you see on this slide, Becoming a Leading Institution in Sexual Assault Prevention, is one example of a resource that's available from EVERFI to support your campus in developing an effective prevention program for students from the time they graduate or matriculate to the time that they graduate. I encourage you to download this paper for even deeper content related to implementing effective prevention efforts on your campus. And lastly, this brings us to the EVERFI approach. How is it that we build effective courses? What is the foundation for the courses, all of our courses that we build to address this and other critical health and safety issues? So these are those philosophical foundations. And for me, it's really important that we have a core philosophical foundation so that all of the courses that we build complement and reinforce each other and adhere to a similar approach. So we have here that it's so important that our programs be inclusive so that students see themselves in the course. We reference different kinds of identity groups, but also different kinds of social experiences and choices. So for example, not all students wish to be engaging in sexual activity or doing so. Our courses provide an opportunity for students who may be in that bucket to see themselves reflected in the course. We may have students who are, for example, already in long-term relationships. It's important that our courses also reflect that as well, as one example of being inclusive, and that students be able to see their experiences and their identities reflected in the kinds of images that are in the course. And then when it comes to student empowerment, bystander intervention strategies are one piece, and we are really focused on skill building around students having a wide variety of ways in which they can intervene in potential situations of harm, as well as learning how to see those potential situations of harm to begin with. But there are also skill building components that are about empowerment because they're related to forming healthy relationships. And for those students who may have already experienced harm, we have live advocacy support that are designed to empower students to be able to take control of their experience and to chart a path going forward for their own healing. We ask students to consider their values. This is something I care about deeply. It forms a core foundation of the work that we do at EVERFI. I think that it sets our work apart. We ask students to think about what is important to them. What do they believe in about themselves? How do they engage with others? And we ask them to make those decisions based on their values. This calls a value is a framework that resonates not only with our faith-based partners, but we have found it to be also a powerful opportunity for that self-reflective learning that is important for all students. And then when we think about how are we student-centered, this includes not only how we build our courses that my colleague Karen is going to talk about in just a few minutes, but also how our courses focus on peers speaking to peers, how they model appropriate behavior, and how they share perspective. So this student-centeredness is a part of developing a positive social norms within the students that are taking this course. And with that, I'm excited to bring in my colleague Karen Langman to share a deeper look at how EVERFI's new sexual assault prevention for undergraduates course lives into this EVERFI approach, and also what we are bringing new to this conversation to build on the strengths of our previous courses that I've already shared with you. So thank you so much, Karen.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Holly. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to speak with all of you today. Holly's right. We have had our sleeves rolled up. We've been very excited to dig into this next era of our sexual assault prevention courses. So I just want to show you a little bit about the value that's behind an EVERFI course. So a bit of an inside peek at what happens behind the scenes here in terms of course development. So I'll talk a little bit about curriculum design and our research process, and then I'll go right into the fun part of demoing the actual course for you. So curriculum design. So the second layer of our approach to curriculum development here at EVERFI consists of how we integrate those philosophical foundations that Holly just talked about into course design and content. So what do we mean by active learning as it relates to this course? Here I'm referring to the creative ways that we've taken content and crafted it into problem solving, case studies, role plays, and different reflection opportunities throughout the course. So content that really draws learners in so that they're more critically engaged in the course content. Course dialogue and case-based scenarios within the course have been drawn from our focus groups with students at partner institutions across the country. So we've used students' language, the challenges they've expressed to us, and the real-life scenarios that they've shared to inspire course content. So this better engages learners in the content, making the course relevant to them, which is really one of our primary goals here. And this is what we mean when we say that EVERFI offers education for the real world. Lastly, we've made a critical effort to scaffold knowledge and learning objectives, not only within this sexual assault prevention course, but among the suite of our sexual assault prevention courses that we're developing. For example, the sexual assault prevention ongoing education course. Okay, a little bit about our research process. So here I just want to briefly highlight a part of what makes EVERFI curriculum unique. So some of the rigor and resources that go into course development. For example, for the sexual assault prevention for undergraduates course, we began by analyzing what student learners have told us. So I looked at over 500
Haven surveys and focused on questions that we asked students about their suggestions for improvement to the course, as well as what they thought was valuable about the course already. Then we organized and facilitated student focus groups with students at various diverse partner institutions. And we also formed an advisory council in which we consulted with a diverse group of campus prevention leaders and renowned researchers at 15 partner institutions throughout the early stages of the curriculum development of this course. In terms of our talent here, our prevention education team and subject matter experts represent 85 years of experience in public health, advocacy, and prevention, with expert knowledge on research-based best practices. And lastly, our legal team that tracks legislative changes and ensures that the course is compliant and up to date throughout our product life cycle. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of the value and rigor that goes into the development of EVERFI courses. And without too much more on that, I'm going to go ahead and skip into the course and show you a couple of pages here of what we've been putting together. So I'll go here. Okay. All right, so you're looking at the welcome page of the course. Before I jump in, I want to show you in the menu here a few of our customization opportunities. So within the resources here, this represents all of the different types of resources that we offer partners to customize in their courses. All of these different types of resources, with the exception of the other type, appear on a page in the course, and there is an unlimited amount of resources that you can add here. As I move through the course, I'll highlight a few other places where you can input customization options like custom text, so a welcome letter or a closing letter, custom images, and videos. Now I'm going to go into the course, into Module 1, which is the introduction module. You're not going to be able to hear sounds, but I would like you to see an example of one of the video assets in our courses. So here we go. I'll turn the closed captioning on.
This is an exciting time.
Okay, so this is an example of one of our motion graphic videos. It introduces students to the topics that will be addressed in the course, but it also serves as a kind of call to action for student involvement in responding to these issues. And the purpose here is to engage students by setting the tone of the learning experience. And as Holly had mentioned, our art assets and imagery have been carefully designed to capture the diversity of student learners so that students really see themselves in the course. That's something that's not only important in these motion graphics, but throughout the imagery in the course. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead to Module 2, Values, Identities, and Relationships. I'm going to show you another video asset in the course. In this module, students reflect on their values and identities, so what's important to them, how they see and define themselves, as well as asking them to consider how others see and define them. We've chosen to develop new content on values and identities as its own module because we know that some identities face additional challenges and questions regarding sexual violence and assault. So we wanted to lay a foundation in the beginning of the course for students to reflect on their own identities and the identities of the many new students that they'll be engaging with throughout their first couple of months on campus. Okay, skipping ahead. We believe that an exploration of identities and values is really a large part of the story of why sexual violence continues to occur on college campuses. So here, we've made a priority of delving into this content, again, at the beginning of the course, to lay a positive foundation and provide an opportunity for learners to reflect on this critical piece of their identities and how that affects their healthy relationships with others. Okay, and jumping ahead a couple of pages. This is our policy acknowledgement page. This is a place for partners to upload their sexual misconduct policy. It's a very important customization option for within the course. You can upload your institution's sexual misconduct policy here, as well as, so once you do so, it will also appear in the menu here on the policy page. Students can link to your policy there as well. So at any point in the course, they can access it here. They also are given an in-course page with your policy that would have your policy link if you provide one, name, and whatever descriptive text you'd like to include in that policy customization there. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead to Module 3, Gender Identities and Stereotypes. I'm going to go on to page 2. So this module guides learners through an engaging reflection on how a person's identity affects their perception of sexual violence. So their degree of awareness about or personal experience with these issues. Again, still scaffolding that knowledge from values, identities, opportunities to take action to respond to these types of issues on campus. Let's skip ahead to page 5. So this is an example of another video asset in the course. We took a research opportunity, so the ability to interview students at a partner institution about gender identities and stereotypes, and created this video to inform course content. So this is an asset in our course that we're excited to be able to integrate. Students are talking about their experiences and awareness of gender stereotypes and how that makes them feel as a primer to the rest of the module. We'll jump to page 6. So here is where we really pivot to asking students to think about what they would do in a situation where they're witnessing harmful language, behavior, actions. So really digging into the bystander intervention call to action, call to respond from students. So this module also features other educational video assets that model different language and behavior for responding to stereotypical, sexist, and derogatory language. Language that targets or criticizes a person or group based on their gender or sexual orientation. And this is an example of one of the opportunities that I mentioned a few minutes ago about an opportunity for partners to upload their own videos. And this example would be a custom video on the topic of diversity. So we placed this opportunity here in the course for you to further customize the course to reflect your institution. Okay, I'm going to jump to Module 4, Sexual Harassment and Stalking. Here's our introduction page to that module. So in this module, students learn about how to recognize and address sexual harassment and stalking, including what those two behaviors look like on a college campus, and what options for responding they have if they personally experience or know of someone who is experiencing this kind of behavior. Okay. So research and subject matter expertise inform the types of sexual harassment that we highlight here. I really want to note the number of examples that you can see here in bullet points that we provide for each of these types of sexual harassment. This is intentional because we know that many students don't really classify many of these behaviors as, quote, harassment. And so we wanted to make a really concerted effort to provide a lot of relevant examples to further inform students that what they may be experiencing is in fact harassment and that they can do something about it. Okay, jumping ahead. Okay, so here's an example of one of our case studies. So on the left here, you'll see that it pitches the user a scenario and then asks them to choose from a variety of responses that continue the narrative. Each of these responses has feedback. So this is the correct answer indicated by the green check mark. Okay, now I'm going to jump to page 11. So this is our summary page. This is a page that is included in every module as a way of recapping the core content that was addressed in the module in a very succinct way, and provides a few key takeaways here to remind students of some of the highlights that they just learned about in that module. Okay, Module 5, consent, coercion, and stepping in. So our material on consent is one of the aspects of this new course that I think we're most proud of. Our approach here was to reflect our goal of normalizing the concept of consent. So instead of just only associating consent with sexual activity, we wanted to open this up and really make it a more robust and full aspect of healthy communication in general. This is also one of the topics that our student focus group insights were really, really valuable to us. So as an example, students told us that they wanted us to, quote, deformalize consent and make it accessible, meaning use language that students themselves would use. So in these focus groups, we asked students, how do you talk about consent? Do you talk about consent? What does it look like from your perspective? What do your friends say? What do your friends do? So that we could use position consent in a way that didn't make it, quote, seem so legal, is what we heard from students. So what we've done here is frame consent in a positive way, using accessible language or language that resonates with students, taking students' advice, in an attempt to show students that consent doesn't have to be intimidating or awkward or formal, that it can just simply be part of a normal, healthy, empowering conversation. This is yet another example of a video asset in our course, approaching learning objectives through media, which is what we hear from students that they want. Not only responding to student suggestions for more video assets, but allowing us to model to students real conversations in realistic situations where consent is being discussed. And that's what the remainder of this video does. Okay. Jumping to page 7. This is another example of one of our case studies that engages the learner in participating in a dialogue, so continuing the narrative by responding to fill in the next steps of how they would, what they would do in this situation or what they would advise someone else to do in the situation. For wrong answers, you receive feedback and just the opportunity to try again to select the right answer. Jumping ahead to page 11, what does coercion look like? So again, based on student feedback and subject matter expertise, as well as our advisory council's recommendation, we know that most students assume coercion is primarily physical. So the use of physical force to engage someone in sexual activity. So what we did here is we wanted to provide numerous examples of coercion, different forms of coercion other than simply physical forms, highlighting what coercion sounds like, using, again, student language, so that these concepts resonate more soundly with student learners. Okay, and lastly, Module 6. Okay, reporting options and responding to survivors. So the content in this section of this module represents entirely new content for our sexual assault prevention program. Here we're acknowledging that sexual assault doesn't only happen to women, as is sometimes assumed, and we feel it's really important to not only reflect the most current academic research and expertise on the topic, but also acknowledge and explain to students how survivors of various identities are impacted by sexual violence and abuse. Okay, jumping ahead to page 6. This is an example of a customization opportunity for partners a place to feature local support resources, as well as medical and healthcare options. So within this new sexual assault prevention course, we have yet again expanded the number of opportunities for partners to provide different types of customized resources to students in the course. Okay, this module also provides students with practical information about preserving evidence as well as options for notifying authorities. Okay, so in response to student and partner feedback, we wanted to provide a space specifically for confidential reporting resources. So this page, again, represents another opportunity for partners to upload as many confidential reporting resources as they would like, and this would appear as an in-course page to the learner. Okay, and then now I'm just going to skip ahead to the conclusion. I'm going to conclude here and pass it back to Jen, who's going to discuss how this new course fits within the broader landscape of prevention education in higher education.
All right, great. Thank you, Karen, so much for walking us through that demo. I'm just going to address a couple of questions that have come in. Thank you so much for asking those. One of which, all great questions. It looks like you can click through the course. Can students do that? Such a great question. The answer is no. Karen's going through an open demo link, which allows people who just want to demo the course to click through and check things out. In the actual instance, participants are required to go through sequentially and to get every exercise correct in order to move forward. And also one of the neat features of our instructional design of this course is that if you have this course up on a screen, you try to click to another tab, you try to click to another window, just have it playing in the background, not really paying attention, the course pauses. So you actually have to go back to the tab, press continue, and pay attention to the material in order to move forward in the course. And that's a really huge testament to our instructional designers contributing to this program. One other question around sharing gender identity. How do students feel comfort-wise about sharing their gender identity? Great question. So all of our questions, all the data is anonymous. It is only ever not distributed, but for you to see in aggregate. And so we make that very clear to students as they go through the course that this is anonymous, and so that they can feel comfortable sharing that type of information. And so you all, as an administration, can get accurate data from your student body as well. Okay, so going into the next slide, Karen, that would be great. Really what Karen and what Holly have just shared with us is just the quality of the course, the methodology, the research, the state specificity, everything that has gone into the sexual assault prevention for undergraduate course. It looks amazing. It's a testament to the team that we have here working on all cylinders all of the time. The richness of the course content, the technology, leads us to the components that result from the output of the course and ultimately the data that we provide back to you after students go through the program. And as we think about the issues of sexual assault, we see them being elevated to the highest levels of an institution. We are seeing more and more trends towards president's councils, towards boards asking for data to demonstrate impact as part of the strategy to move the needle on these topics. And so what I wanted to share is, Karen, actually, we can go back one slide, is a sample set of data from our sexual assault prevention undergraduate course that this course provides. And so this is a sample set, obviously, but you'll be able to see as students go through the course the percentage of students who say this course made me more confident in my ability to intervene when I see concerning behavior. This course taught me where to find resources for sexual assault and abusive relationships at my school. This course increased my understanding of school policies, and ultimately to use this data to demonstrate the impact tangibly around the education and the impact that it's having on your student body. Beyond the course itself, one of the most powerful parts of what we do, for anyone who is new to EVERFI, are the attitudinal and behavioral insights that can be used to support institutional impact on the challenges of sexual assault. So I just want to take, we can go to the next slide, just to go through a few ways, just anecdotally, that schools have used our data to drive impact in their community. So first, early on in the student's experience at your institution, schools will use the real-time data gathered from our courses to do tailored social norms messaging during orientation for incoming students, to dispel misperceptions of their peers' attitudes and behaviors, to share positive data points that reinforce that the majority of students would act in healthy and supportive ways, and to encourage students to play a role in their community. With our engagement data, administrators have the ability to identify students who want to participate in setting the social climate on campus as potentially a recruiting tool for a student sexual assault advisory council or a student-led climate survey council, or participants to support other initiatives and events, let's say workshops on campus that you want to deploy, but might need some additional resources and see value in students contributing themselves to making those events happen. Next is around partnerships. So if institutions, for example, see that a large portion of their students maybe aren't reporting their experiences or aren't receiving support with regards to relationship violence, the school, and we've seen this actually with some community colleges, might forge a relationship with local community organizations to help increase support for your students, especially if you know that students spend a meaningful amount of time off campus and in the community. With policies and processes, sharing campus resources, how to report is critical to the education that we're providing. So if schools see that students are not understanding where to go, this can be an indicator that institutions need to beef up their online and on-campus presence to make sure that students are getting this information. Similarly, if students aren't reporting, perhaps the school uncovers that their reporting protocol isn't easily accessible for students, and we can make changes then because of the data that we're getting. And then lastly, we see institutions often use their data to inform the broader strategic planning and budget allocation process. So we've had schools share data from both our real-time analytics platform as well as our impact reports in their meetings with senior leadership to clearly demonstrate the attitudes and behaviors of their students. And we have seen institutions secure the six-figure increases in budget towards programming and activities because, in part, of the data that we're able to provide to continue to engage healthy students, to help institutions prioritize where to spend those funds in a way that is uniquely suited to their specific institution strengths and needs, and provide them with ample access to become involved at the institution in really positive ways. And so all of this is to say that a tremendous amount of resources, of expertise, of thought is put into the development of all of our courses and into the evolution of our programs. In addition, what I think is important to note is that so much of our course evolution and iterations are informed by the feedback loop of our 1,700 institutions we work with. So I just want to take a moment and thank you, all of those who are currently working with us, for the role you have played in helping us be stronger and more valuable and helping you tackle sexual assault at your institution in the ways it impacts your students as well. And so that brings us to our last poll. This is going to be for those on the webinar who do not currently work with us to provide primary sexual assault prevention training. If you would like to learn more about deploying this course, Sexual Assault Prevention for Undergraduates, in 2018, please check yes. If not, please check no. From our first poll, we had about 30% of the participants who did not currently work with us, and that's going to help us determine when we can shut off the poll depending on the participation level. And while that is still going, for those who are already working with us in any capacity, you will be shared this information through your customer success manager. So please communicate with them if there is interest in learning more and deploying this course this fall. And with that, I'm going to leave the poll open for a little bit longer. And we're actually just a couple minutes to the top of the hour. So any other questions? I know there were questions that we didn't get an opportunity to respond to today, but we're going to follow up with those individually. So really, thank you so much for your questions. They are meaningful to us. And how are we doing on the poll rate? Yeah, I think we're just about there. So thank you everyone for participating today. Those of you who have indicated interest in learning more about deploying the course this year, we will be in touch. And with that, have a wonderful day.
All right, thank you very much to Holly, Karen, and Jen. It's been a great showcase of this new course, and we shared a lot of insights on how we develop our courses. And so whether you're working with us or not, I hope this was valuable. I'd like to thank all of you that have participated and that are still with us to this point. I just want to remind everyone, the slides and a full recording of this presentation will be sent to you for you to keep. And also, as soon as you switch off, there will be a short poll that initiates 2 to 3 minutes to complete. But we'd really appreciate if you could please give us your feedback on today's event so we can take it in great consideration for designing our next webinars. With that, I'd like to bring us to a close. Thank everybody, and hope to see you at our next webinar. Thank you very much, and have a great day from EVERFI.